Okay, let's cover a question related to uncollectible accounts. It's number 29 for those of you that have been smart enough to go to the sessions. This is number 29. Number 29 is an allowance for bad debt. I always call it bad debt, allowance for uncollectible accounts. And it's asking you for what kind of entry needs to be made at year end using the balance sheet approach. Remember, the balance sheet approach is kind of the more complex one because the balance sheet approach is the one that requires that you adjust. You have to take into account what's already there. Okay, so let's look at the way the problem lays out. Well, first of all, it tells you, let me go ahead and get this formatted. It tells you that you've got $62,000 that are 30 days old. In other words, between 1 and 30 days. It tells you you've got $40,000 of your accounts receivable that are 31 to 60 days, and then $23,000 that are 61 to 90, then over 90 days. You'll look here, what this kind of de facto means is you have $134,000 of accounts receivable outstanding. Remember, accounts receivable is what you were hoping you were going to collect inside of 30 days. So you've got obviously some, I wouldn't call it bad debt, but you've got slow pays that are creating a problem. You'll also notice the problem says that only about 2% of the debt that falls in the 1 to 30 range goes bad. So this is what you expect to not collect. Let's call this bad debt. They call it uncollectible, whatever. And then you'll notice too that 4% is not collected when it's 31 to 60 days. So that's a little bit worse news. Then once it gets out to the 61 to 90 day period, 11% is not collected. So you're getting higher. And you notice that if any accounts receivables are older than 90 days, it looks like you're lucky to collect 50%. So this is, since we're using the balance sheet approach, putting it up here because a lot of times people are confused and they're not exactly sure what I'm saying. So I want to make sure that we're clear on what exactly we mean. If it's using the balance sheet approach, this is proof because you're using an aging of receivables method. If I can spell. This aging of receivables, this is exactly what we're seeing here. It's an aging of receivables method. So we cannot make an entry for 9870. We can't simply make an entry for 9870. Let me show you why. Back in January of 2017, when we started the year, something was here. In other words, a balance was in allowance for uncollectible accounts. We can presume that there was a balance in there because that's the tank that's full that we're going to lower as we write off accounts receivable. Or we credit accounts receivable and then we debit the allowance for uncollectible accounts. So we started with some kind of balance, which it does not tell you what it is, nor is it asking you to solve. I'm just showing you the pieces so you can see them all. And then throughout the year, with that amount that's in that tank, you wrote off a certain amount as you went along, making certain entries. What the problem is telling you is you started with a certain amount, you wrote off a certain amount, and this is what's left. The problem literally says $1,000. There's a credit balance in allowance for uncollectible accounts that was $1,000. So you already have $1,000 in this direction credit sitting in the account. So $1,000 was not used. Since $1,000 was not used, you carry that over into the next year. Remember how this carried over something from the previous year? You're going to carry this over into 2018, but this is how much is left over. So instead of the entry that it asks you, it says, hey, what is uncollectible accounts expense? Instead of just 9870, instead of making this entry, 9870 debit for uncollectible accounts expense, and refilling the tank here with 9870. The problem with doing that, if we hit 9870, is we would not be getting this to what it needs to be. This amount, oops, I'm sorry, I've got this reversed. This should be over here. So it's debit, credit. The 9870, if we do this, the problem is we're not going to end up with this magic number that we have to come up to. Okay, so we do this analysis, we come up, we do this analysis, we come up to 9870, and that's what we have to have in the account, in this account. If we make this entry, if we just blindly ignore what's already there and make an entry for a credit of 9870 and a debit to uncollectible accounts expense of 9870, we actually will have the account messed up because we'll have 10,870. Okay, but we need to end up with this. We need to start the new year with a 9870, and that's why this is lowered to 8870. And the answer to 29 is 9870. We've already got 1,000 and a credit balance there, so the difference is what's taken. So this refills the tank. We recognize all of our expense. This is end of year. So we keep everything straight here. Now we're ready to go into the new year with the balance that should be there, 9870 for 1/1/2018. Just wanted to show you this. Again, when you see this uncollectible or this aging of receivables method, that tells you, unfortunately, you cannot ignore this. This cannot be ignored. You have to factor it in to the entry that you make, the debit to the expense account and the credit to allowance for uncollectible accounts. I hope you found this useful.